Thank you, Shlomit, and good day to all of you. I trust that you are in a much chillier weather than we are here in Jerusalem. Even though it's beginning to be pretty cold here in Jerusalem, we are feeling the winter. So I'm glad to be here with you today. And I'll try to keep my remarks brief, and I would welcome your questions and comments. I'm sorry, when afterwards. I want to start with the Jewish prayer that I'm sure most of you know, that we sing on Friday evening, basically at every Jewish home, which is Eshet Chayil, a woman of valor who will find. And in this beautiful prayer, we are enumerating all the assets and all the valor of the Jewish woman. And of course, we are starting with her role inside her own family, as the one who is in charge of the education of the children and the well-being of her own family. And then we go on and enumerate her roles and duties in the community, as participating in the charity in the community, assisting other members of her community. And we go on to talk about the duties and roles of the woman, the Jewish woman, both in her own society and in her own greater society, which is her country and her state. And I think that as we look at Women of Valor, or Eshet Chayil, we can see the numerous and the various roles that we women are carrying out throughout history and throughout the various layers of our society and community. It's an interesting question to take all of those traditional, if you will, duty of ours and look at them a little bit in a framework which is totally different. And that's not a civilian framework, nor is it the framework of a family, but rather in the context of the military and in the context of an army. Now, most of you are following, of course, the news, and you do, as we unfortunately know from our own experience, that in the past 60 years, ever since its very existence, the State of Israel has been fighting for its own life. And fighting for its existence and life is not a cliche, not merely words, but this for us takes a very real and very tangible forms, in the sense that each and every one of us, men and women alike, by the age of 18, we go and do our military service, male for 3 years and female for 2 years. Most of us go on and serve in the reserve service till the age of 45, and unfortunately, too often times, we were called on special duty to fight during war. The last time for me was, of course, last summer, during the summer of 2006, and during the second Lebanon war. But we all grow up with this kind of environment around us. For us, it's almost like a second nature. But I want us to stop for a while and look a little bit about the meaning of what it is to live throughout a war, and especially this specific kind of warfare that we are living here in the Middle East, and specifically here in Israel. Now, I'm sure that if I were to tell you just what kind of a mental picture, what kind of association do you have when I'm saying war, you would probably describe a meeting, a violent meeting, between armies of two states, all in uniforms, fully geared, fighting one against the other, somewhere in a battlefield and in a front which is far away from where we live. But this is a place where usually and traditionally one army of a state is fighting another army. And in this time, in this sense, we are looking at two sides with full uniform, totally recognizable, and fully geared, and fighting with the same type of armfare. You would find Air Force fighting or battling Air Force. You would find Navy against Navy, and of course infantry against infantry. In the past decades, the world have learned, unfortunately, to fight and have witnessed a totally different kind of war. And we in Israel have encountered this definitely in the last decade, and even more than this, when we are looking at the type of warfare that we are facing. I'm talking about the war against terror, which is by its very nature totally different than any other type of warfare that we have encountered before. And this for several reasons. First and foremost, we see it as part of an asymmetric warfare, in a sense that you have an army of a state, an army of an actor, which is a state, fighting group of militias, of terrorists, of a non-state. We are faced a state versus a non-state. That means that we as a state are facing or are sending our army, again fully recognizable in uniform and fully armed, to fight something that for the naked eye does not look at all like an army. It could look like a child, it could look like a man, it could look like a young woman, and I'll give some such example. But actually this is terrorism in disguise. This is exactly what terrorism is looking for, to disguise itself as innocent civilian, to hide among civilians, to get out of those neighborhood in which they live that, again, look from the outset as regular living neighborhood like in any other states, and they would go out, strike with their terrorism act, and again hide again behind the civilian and use basically the civilian as a human shield. Now imagine with me, go along with me as I describe several pictures. Let's say that you are a commander in one of the checkpoints, one of the numerous checkpoints that are between us and between cities like Jenin or Nablus, where the terrorists are operating. Imagine yourself as an Israeli commander in one of those checkpoints, and you are searching Palestinians who are wishing to cross the checkpoint to go inside Israel, either for work or for medical treatment or for any other purpose. And as you are checking them, you see that approaching you is what seemed to be like a child or a very young adolescent, maybe 13, 14 years of age. He is wearing a jeans and a long t-shirt, and he is approaching you, and you see from the first glance it looks like any other teenager that we know. It's a child, so our immediate instinct is that this is something to cherish, this is something to protect, this is definitely not a threat. But then imagine that as this young adolescent, this youngster approaches, you see something very interesting or unusual happening as the people, the Palestinian people on the line, are rushing aside, as if he's telling them something as he is moving along, something that is making them just go aside and not stay in line. It is at that moment that the commander of this checkpoint is getting suspicious, and he feels that even though in his eyes he is seeing a youngster, he feels that something else is going on here. And that's why he's stopping everybody at the checkpoint and requesting this youngster to come and approach. And slowly, slowly he is asking him to remove his t-shirt, because this young boy, he is wearing a t-shirt way too big for his size. And as he is taking off his t-shirt, to his amazement, he sees that this young boy has an explosive belt strapped around his waist. This is a story of Hussam Abdu, who was 16 years old when this happened, and his pictures you might have seen on the front page of the New York Times and on the BBC and Sky News, who were carrying this story alive, and so was Fox TV. Because for the next 45 minutes unfolds a drama where all the international media are watching as the commander of the checkpoint is giving instruction to young Hussam Abdu how slowly take off very carefully his explosive belt without detonating it, meaning without turning little Hussam as a shaheed and without killing the commander and all of his troops at the checkpoint. Or take another picture. Take the image of a 26-year-old female lawyer who's waking up one morning in her home in Jenin, and she is driving along all the way to Jerusalem. She wants to cross to Israel, but because of the security fence, she cannot cross immediately. So she is traveling all the way near Jerusalem, where the security fence is not fully completed yet. And there she managed somehow to cross the checkpoint without being arrested. She looks pretty. She's fully made up, and she looks very nice. She would not, nobody would be suspicious toward her. And as she's crossing the checkpoint, on the other side, she has a driver in the car waiting for her. Unfortunately for us, in this case, the driver is an Israeli Arab who's collaborating with terrorism. And they're traveling. They're traveling from Jerusalem to Tel Aviv, and from Tel Aviv they are taking the road near the shore of Israel, a road which I'm sure most of you are familiar with, and they are traveling to Haifa. Halfway between Haifa and Tel Aviv, they are stopping near Hadera, near a big hospital. And she is walking out. It's Saturday in the month of October, about 4 years ago. She's walking to the lobby of the hotel, and she's looking around, and she's deciding that there are not enough people in this lobby, so it will not suit her purpose. So she goes back to the car, and they continue to travel all the way to Haifa. As they are entering Haifa, those of you who have been there, one of the very first stop that you would find is a very nice and big restaurant called Maxim, which is right near the beach. This is a restaurant which is a bit of an establishment in Israel, because it has been owned for the past 25 years by, it's a partnership, it's a business partnership between an Israeli Arab and an Israeli Jew in very good terms, and this is, if you will, a symbol of Jewish-Arab coexistence here in Israel. She decides, by the time that she gets there, it's Saturday around 2 o'clock in the afternoon. It's a good time for everybody's having lunch. The beach is full of families, grandparents and grandchildren sitting. The restaurant is fully packed, and she decided this is a very good place for her act. So she walks inside the restaurant, and she orders lunch, and she eats lunch, and she even pays for her lunch. And as she is walking towards the exit to leave the restaurant, she gives one last glance at the fully packed restaurant with so many families, and she decides that's the right moment and that's the right place, and this is where she is detonating her explosive belt, killing that day 23 people. Some of them members of the same family, grandparents and aunt and mother and father and children that were killed on that Shabbat on the beach in Haifa. Nothing in the appearance of this young woman, as nothing in the appearance of the young boy I described earlier, would have given you a hint that we are talking here about a smart human bomb. And I'm calling it a smart bomb, even though in the military jargon we are talking about smart bomb, when we are talking about high advanced, technology advanced bomb, laser bomb or others, precision weapon. But I call this a human smart bomb because basically they can go wherever they want, they can choose their target, and they can decide exactly what kind of damage they want to create, who do they want to kill, and this is where exactly they decide to detonate, as shown in the last small story that I've just described. In this sense, the appearance of our eyes can be very deceiving because we see a woman, we see a child. The immediate thought that we have about this is that this is something that needs protection, not something that you would look at it with suspicion and consider it as a threat. Or take a house. If I were to tell you, take a picture of a house where a family with 3 children lives, you will tell me that this is probably a safe haven for that family. This is a place where you graze your children. This is a place where you feel most secure. What happened, though, when you enter such a home, as unfortunately this has been the case so many times for us, and you walk and you find a mother, a father, parents and children and young children and even baby, you walk into the baby's room, and just because we had very good and precise intelligence, we know to get to the baby's crib, request the mother to pick up the baby in her hand, move the baby's crib, and just beneath find an entrance to a tunnel that is running beneath the border between Israel and Egypt. I'm talking about a house like which we've found by the dozens in Rafah, near the border, the internationally recognized border between Israel and Egypt. And those tunnels, which the entrance could be inside the children's room, inside a regular home, that nothing from the outside will even look suspicious, and you know how to reach there only because you have good information. But such a tunnel could be as deep as 10 meter long, 10 meter deep inside the ground, and could run as long as half a mile and sometimes even more than this beneath the border between Israel and Egypt. And this is being used as part of the terrorist infrastructure to smuggle arms, ammunition, terrorists, sometimes even experts from Al-Qaeda or from the Hezbollah, who are using those tunnels in order to smuggle, to come inside the Gaza Strip and bring with them know-how, explosive, suicide bombers, etc. If you take those three images, mental images, and you understand that what you see with your eyes is very deceptive, because basically all of those are part of the infrastructure and the tool of the enemy to fight us. This, you begin to understand what the war on terror is. This asymmetry comes to mind not only because of the fact that you have a state and a non-state actor, not because you have one side fully recognized with uniform and fully geared, and the other side totally unrecognizable. On the contrary, it is disguised to something as innocent and as pure as a child or as a woman. And the fact that the battlefield is no longer somewhere in the Sinai Desert or in the Golan Heights as we have experienced in previous war, but rather the battlefield is right where you live. The battlefield is the restaurant in Haifa, is the bus in Jerusalem that has exploded, is the shopping mall in Netanya, in Beersheba, in Afula, and the list is just too long to go over it. It is exactly your regular environment where you live. This is where terrorism is choosing as its target battlefield. For us as military, who are trained to fight against another army, this creates huge moral dilemmas, and this creates very massive professional dilemma that we had to deal with in the past decade, that we have been facing this type of warfare. Now, if you consider that in this type of warfare, when you need to find a suicide bomber who is hiding, let's say in a 4-story building, which is fully populated with regular innocent families, in the heart of the city of Nablus or Jenin or Gaza, but you need to get to the very specific room, in the very specific apartment, in the very specific building, in the very specific neighborhood where this terrorist is hiding, and you need to stop him or her before they perpetrate their act, then you can begin to understand the problem. And then also you understand that a traditional strength or any regular army are useless or irrelevant in light of such a situation. We have F-16, and we could probably use the Israeli Air Force, which is known to be one of the best in the world, and with a raid from the air, we might bomb the area, but God forbid if we were to do that. We would never do that, because we might hit the terrorist himself, but we will probably kill many dozens of others who are innocent Palestinian families and children, men and women. We could use our tanks, very advanced in the world, the Merkava, known all around the world. We could use it, but it will be to no avail and almost not relevant when you enter the very narrow city of a refugee, very narrow streets of a refugee camp in Nablus or elsewhere. Therefore, most of the equipment and most of the tactic that we as a regular army have are becoming almost obsolete in light of such a type of a warfare. Therefore, we have resorted to developing and using two major efforts. One is to learn to act and to advance in very small infantry units, infantries which have mobile vehicles that are armed and with armor that can protect them, that can bring them as close to the refugee camp as possible. And our soldiers and commanders are trained to act in very small groups. Can you still hear me?
Yes.
Okay, because I've lost your picture, so I just want to make sure that you are still there. So one effort is to do this kind of warfare with very small infantry unit that are working very precisely, are not using massive firepower, but are rather using precision ammunition, and are performing their duty very carefully, so no civilian and no innocent people will be hurt. This is one effort. The second effort is the effort of using more and more advanced technology from afar, meaning instead of getting very close to the rival, to the terrorist, and apprehending him, and by doing that you are risking the life of your own soldiers, we are trying to use as many advanced technology as possible on the perimeter of the zone of danger. And I will give you an example. The security fence has been instrumental since its inception as a part of the Israeli security and defense system. And our security fence is full with detection equipment, very advanced and sophisticated technological such equipment that is based on monitoring 24 hours 7 the security fence with camera, that a certain operation room at the back which is manned 24 hours a day for the whole year, is receiving the image from the security fence and can alert the forces if someone is approaching. Those operation rooms, for example, are most of them manned almost fully, almost 100% of them are female soldiers. What they request is a very high degree of concentration, of precision, and of the ability of multitasking, in the sense that you need to watch several screens, and you need to be able to watch the screen, to receive an audio while you are talking with the commander, and to be able to precisely guide the commander and the forces to the area where someone suspicious seem to be approaching the security fence. Like the same system that we have on the security fence, we have on different other perimeters, and most of those advanced technological equipment are being manned and operated by female soldiers. And it's an interesting question, how come female soldiers are the one operating those operational rooms, those rooms that are basically very professional and are very advanced in the battlefield. And it seems that the commander answer were that the female soldiers were more than anything else adapt to this type of duty, since they had no problem of concentrating for long hours, since they were very precise and they were somewhat cold-blooded, in the sense that even when there was an alarming situation, they would not panic. And most of the commanders have chosen female soldiers to man this type of equipment and to be really in the first line of battling against terrorism. This has not always been the case, as you probably know. True that in 1948, at the War of Independence, necessity was such that women and men were fighting shoulder to shoulder to bring about the big victory, the first big victory in the War of Independence of Israel. But immediately after that, it was the decision of the various Israeli government that since the state was established and since we had the IDF, the Israeli Defense Forces, women will serve and do their military service, but will not be in the first line of fire and will not fight immediately at the battlefield. And therefore, for many, many years, female soldiers had the more traditional profession in the army as nurses, teachers, and helping the soldiers in the combat, but not doing combat duties themselves. It was in the mid-80s as a result of an appeal to the Supreme Court of one brave woman by the name of Alice Miller, who decided that she wants to be a pilot and she would not take no for an answer. She decided to take her appeal to the Supreme Court of Israel, and she won. The Supreme Court of Israel decided that there was no longer a reason to ban female soldiers, women, to apply, and if they are fit, to even serve in combat duty. As a result of this, and as a result of this appeal, so I was telling you about the mid-80s when this brave young woman, Alice Miller, who wanted to be a pilot, appealed to the Supreme Court of Israel, which indeed decided from that moment on that the army should have a plan for gradually letting women who so chooses to apply to combat units and to do their military service as combatants. Now, this has been quite a change, a dramatic change for the Israeli Defense Forces and basically for the Israeli society as well. In the close to 20 years that have elapsed since then, we find today that most of the military combating positions are opened to women. I say most because in certain units this has not happened yet due to the very specific nature of the unit. We are talking about special elite and commando unit where it is more difficult. But I would say that 95% of the combating position in the Israeli army are open now to women, and women can volunteer for a combat job. A woman soldier does not have, like the men have, to go for a combating position. She can choose to do that and then volunteer, and if she chooses to go to such a position, oftentimes she would be requested to serve the same length of period as a man does, which is 3 years instead of the mandatory 2 years. Not in every position, but in certain positions. The reason being that the training for those positions is so much longer that if they had to serve only 2 years, they would hardly have a chance to even serve in that position, and therefore they are requested to enlist for another year and serve as 3 years as do the men. But by now, all of or most of those combating positions are open to women. And interestingly enough, now that the onus was on us, the women, the situation suddenly looked different. I would first, before I describe it, say that the Israeli army have done a massive effort to change certain of the norms and certain of the regulations so that it will be able to have women serving in certain positions. The fact, for example, that you would have in a field unit, in a combating field unit, men and women serving together would require different bathrooms, separate bedrooms, separate showers, etc., which meant for the army to double its logistics in terms of having an, let's say, an infantry field unit staying on the field. It meant that some of the effort targets had to be changed in terms of the physical efforts being requested, which will have to be different for a male soldiers and for a female soldiers. Our body, biologically, is built differently, and therefore to the same type of effort, different scales were built for male and for female. All of this was learned through a very massive process. This did not happen overnight. It took a long process of adaptation of both sides. We had also to encounter, and I'm being here very open and honest with you, question, for example, of sexual harassment. When you have more women soldiers in smaller unit who are far from the headquarters or are in the battlefield, commanders have to be responsible for the safety of everybody, male and female alike. And due to this and more awareness in the Israeli societies, the army today is very advanced, not only compared to other armies, but even compared to the Israeli societies in its regulation, which are all geared to make sure that no woman or man will find themselves in a situation where sexual harassment might be involved. And cases, in the very few cases that such incident happens, they are being tried very severely in the army, and actually the punishment for this in the army is much more severe than the Israeli court, in the regular Israeli court or in the Israeli civilian society. The case being that we need to make sure, we as an army need to make sure that male and female serving in the military will feel secure in the military environment and will not be harassed. This took a massive, as I said, adaptation process from both sides. But after all of this have been done and learned, sometimes through the difficult way, it turned out that we are looking at the numbers, that even though most of those positions have been open to women, only very small numbers of female soldiers have chosen to volunteer and to go to this type of combating unit. Now, when we ask the question why, there are several reasons, of course. First and foremost, this is a much more demanding, trying, and much more difficult military service. I was a commander doing my military service, but I was away as a youngster when I was in my 20s, but I was not serving in the battlefield. Serving and doing your military service in a combat unit is much more difficult, physically, mentally, in terms of the condition of your military service. You are far away from home, sometimes for 21 days. You will not see home for a while. Showers are not properly what you would be used to. The condition of the military service are much more difficult and, of course, dangerous. And therefore, many women have second thought about this, and if they can choose a technological position or a different position which is maybe less demanding and less dangerous, they would choose to do that. We have seen that between 3 to 4% of every enlisted group, every annual enlistment group, only between 3 and 4% of the women are even choosing to go to this type of combat unit. We have seen more success, for example, in the Air Force, in the sense of women applying to the position of pilot and navigator. Again, because this is a very difficult and very demanding course, but the military service itself is somewhat less difficult than serving in an infantry and in a field unit. We found many young women saying that for them to do their military service will be as fulfilling to bring from their own self and what they can contribute, rather go and teach, for example, new olim chadashim, new immigrants, to teach them Hebrew, or to go and teach special needs population, or to do, as my daughter did, a technological service in the intelligence force. They found all of this to be more satisfying than serving in a combat unit. And part of this, and here I'm speaking as a mother, I think that part of it lies with the kind of education that we are giving to our daughters and son as well, but to our daughters, where from the moment that we are fighting, or our generation have been fighting for all of those doors to be open to women, and once those doors are open, we can choose not to go through them. The fact that all of the combating positions are open to women does not necessarily mean that every and each woman have to choose that. They can choose that if they want to, but they do not have to choose it if they prefer differently. So we need on one hand to encourage them to go and try their best. And if they deem that their best is in a combat unit, that's fine. And if they deem that their best is somewhere else, we should be supportive of their choice. I guess that my grandchildren, I don't have any yet, but the future generation, which will be growing and educated in a system where all of those positions are open, will bring more and more women into this type of profession. I'm talking about combating units in the military. Thus far, we have a much higher percentage and growing of women soldiers in the technological position, in the intelligence, and in many other very professional and very important positions in the army. And as I said, on the combat unit, much less advanced than maybe we have thought beforehand. But this is a thought maybe to all of us, and I would like to conclude with that. This is a thought for all of us to think about. The fact that we have now, and I'm talking about Israel, but the same goes for the United States, the fact that we have less and less fences and less glass ceilings and more places open for us, let's say even in politics, women have no problem of going into the Israeli politics, and yet out of the 120 members of Knesset, we find hardly 14 in this Knesset, in previous Knesset, 17 women members of Knesset, which is definitely not enough. We have progress, and we can show progress. For example, we have our Minister of Foreign Affairs, who is a woman, Mrs. Tzipi Livni, and many other women in senior position, but that's not enough. And the fact that all of those doors are open for us, and there are less fences than we used to encounter 20 or 40 or 60 years ago, and we still are not going through that, means that we need to work harder on our self-education and to check with ourselves. It's a sort of almost a balance that we have to do with ourselves, the pros and the cons, and say that if we want to be influential in all walks of life, then we have to opt for a situation, and here, this is my opinion, where in most places, in combat unit as well as in politics, in society, in economy, in education and elsewhere, we women, who are 50% of the population, will be at least 50% of any professional position in all walks of life. For this, we need to better educate ourselves and better educate our children. Thank you very much.